Hi, everybody. My name is Anh Tang, CEO, founder of Tozu Capital. As many of you guys know, since you guys are investors or are recently invested with us, this is our final update for Bitcoin Mining Fund 4 before we launch in the next few weeks. So we're very excited to provide this update to investors. Of course, we'll have more updates as we're rolling into the operations going forward. But this is the final update with our finalized plans, and I'm very excited to announce these plans. Although we announced it in the previous email, but want to just give a full picture, provide a forum for you guys to ask any questions, and then also to really highlight sort of a lot of the learnings and macroeconomic changes that has happened since we started Bitcoin mining and since we started raising for this fund. So we're going to finalize plans. We talk about macro impacts, what has changed, new investor projections, and planned sites that we have, and then finish it with project timelines as best as we can project as of now. So right now we have 1,400 miners going to be deployed in New York, or 29% of the hash power going live over the next few weeks. So the good news is we're live in the next few weeks. So it's probably by the end of the week or next week, we'll probably be live with our first batch of a few hundred miners, and we'll get them live over the next few weeks. What this means is we'll also be setting up a process over the next few weeks to collect everyone's Bitcoin. If you are interested in getting distributions of Bitcoin, we will also...
I presume you meant to collect everybody's address, not Bitcoin, right?
Yes, to collect everyone's Bitcoin address so that we can send a test distribution before we send our first full distribution, which will happen in May for partial March production and full April production. So that's generally the cadence that we've done for the previous funds, and the cadence we'll do for this fund as well, which is to say we're going to be mining for the full month. And then for the first week or two of the next subsequent month, we're settling our expenses, power, operation costs, and then sending distributions to investors. And so that will be the same cadence. And this will be a partial deployment in our New York site, which is where our Fund 3 miners are as well. So those are fully live, and we're making around 1 Bitcoin a day right now from that deployment. And then so the subsequent miners will be deployed in Texas, where we've acquired 5,000 WhatsMiners M30s, which will represent 71% of hash power, which will go live in the end of July. I just had a chat with our rep at Compute North earlier today, and they confirmed that. I also had a chat with them saying that we'd love to get a little bit of tour of the site, and that is southwest of Texas. So summary, operations going live now, essentially, and then distributions happening in May. And the overall plan has really allowed us to have 60% more computational power than what we originally projected when we initially launched the fund. Of course, market conditions have changed. Bitcoin price have fallen, which has allowed us to essentially mine the dip. And we secured these 5,000 miners when Bitcoin was at $37,000. And so we locked in with the deposit for that contract. So what has changed on the macro and macro levels? And I want to highlight why we're making these changes. One is energy prices up, right? We know that from everything we've been hearing that gas prices up, making an investment in oil, of course. And this has been impacting some of our subsequent sites and plans. The major plan impact that has had on our Ohio Sandusky site, which regretfully was unable to make work, was because we found a load study could only support half the amount of megawatts capacity that we needed unless we built a subsequent substation. This made the economics a little bit worse than I wanted. And so then we had a 45-day out on the lease after signing the lease to then back out, which we elected to do. For some of you guys, we were talking about this Argo Helios West Texas site, and they had a change in plans on their side on was impacted by energy prices, and they sold some of their miners to Core Scientific, which now they're pursuing Intel ASIC miners, which I had a call today with them actually to see if we wanted something there. It's not really the most energy efficient miners. I would wait for version 2 there. So the bigger thing that has really happened in this industry is construction delays to systemic industry. And this is in the really big impact is because we're not necessarily going to go out and build these big data centers. The big impact has been sites that I thought were potentially good plan Bs, Cs, and Ds became more expensive, became more limited, and became more delayed. And so I had always this plan E or whatever backup option with Compute North, where I signed that contract in Q4. And I signed the contract in Q4 of last year when it was much easier signing this contract, which I signed a bigger contract. And so we're taking that capacity for this fund. I never thought that I would need to use that for that fund, but I believe that this is the most optimal use of that contract. In fact, that contract I could probably resell. I know this because somebody tried to resell their portion of their contract to me for a 1 cent premium. So I really can see the market for Q1 and Q2. My prediction was that it would have been hard to find data center space, hard to find hosting space, and then it would have been easier in Q3 and 4. My outlook going forward now is it will be continually hard. The supply chain issues and really more about construction to permitting, and permitting has been the bottleneck as more miners want to be in America, which has present more limited options. So very lucky to be able to have that site secured and to have our New York site online now, essentially. The other big thing that has happened, of course, has Bitcoin prices fallen. And there's always been a lag to when Bitcoin price falls to when Bitcoin miner prices falls. And the bigger impact isn't necessarily that Bitcoin price is falling and that profitability is falling, is that because all these systemic delays in construction industry, there's fewer spots for people to put these miners into. And so then that means that these prices are a little bit cheaper. So over the past few weeks, I started seeing prices become really, really cheap to the tune of average of $5,000 to $6,000 per miner, when 3 months ago it was around $8,000 to $9,000 per miner at the scale that we were purchasing. And so we took advantage of that by purchasing a lot more miners than we could have for the budget that we originally had. This also has an impact on slowdown of difficulty, which is, to reiterate, that's sort of the competition to mine Bitcoin. The more people want to get into Bitcoin mining, the harder it is, the less Bitcoin will actually mine. Over the past 2 cycles, meaning 4 weeks, difficulty actually went down for the first time in 2 consecutive cycles. Although if you look at, I believe the next cycle might go up slightly, 3-4%. But I think end of the year, I'm looking at a little bit less difficulty impact than I originally projected because of all these systemic delays. So we're going to be going a little bit smaller on my Q3, Q4 projections in terms of getting to Bitcoin mining. But I'm very lucky to have secured this slot in Q4 of last year and placing our miners into this fund. So what has changed is, to reiterate, Ohio moves to New York and Texas, starting now. So the operations doesn't really change in terms of timelines, but it does change in terms of a partial timeline of 29% of the hash power, We originally projected around 4,000 miners, 374 hash power. These are Bitmain miners. Now we're diversifying into Avalons and Bitmain miners and mostly Rust miners because I believe that those are much better value and always looking for great value for our fund. And so we can get 58% more hash power allocated than original projection. So that means 58% more Bitcoin mined. Of course, controlling for difficulty is the thing that can't change. I also want to highlight this really interesting thing that happens in the market. One is when you buy futures of Bitcoin miners, you get usually a discount. So if you buy today for 100% price spot, call it spot buying, it costs 100%. You can peg it to whatever number. If you buy a month from now, it's usually 3 to 5% cheaper. And subsequent months, you get 3 to 5% cheaper subsequently afterwards. So because we're able to buy July futures contract, we're able to get that really nice benefit. Plus, we're getting a very huge scale, which allows us to get really cheap pricing on that. So we're getting sub $5,000 pricing for our miners, around a little bit, almost $5,000, although when you include shipping, which that might make it more than $5,000. But this really coincides really well with our futures contract in Texas, allowing us to get the most optimal pricing of hosting in a very professional setting. Compute North is just raised $285 million to essentially build more sites in the future. I'm talking about their Q4 plans and 2023 plans. And they're the hosts and they're the provider for our first fund miners, which have done very well. So this interesting model exists, and usually you want to buy spot because you're making more than 3 to 5% potentially a month from Bitcoin mining. But if you have nothing presently available now, or if the options now are very much comes at a premium, which I would not want us to intake for our long-term economic viability, then I believe this coincided with our most optimal decision. So I want to provide some new projections, although I want to reiterate that these projections are, of course, hard. As soon as I put them out, I don't know what Bitcoin price would be, difficulty go up and down. I can try to forecast as much as possible. But one thing that I really want to really emphasize is that if Bitcoin stays flat or falls in by half, because of the depreciation benefits you can get, meaning that you're getting essentially 100% bonus depreciation on the cost of miners, you're able to essentially get that potentially as a potential tax benefit. And because there's no recapture, if we're not selling it in the future for a profit, of course, taking that cost base to zero, then you really gain that benefit year one. And that's evidenced by for Fund 1 and 2 investors who will be sending K1s out in short order. I just got an email today from our tax advisor saying we'll have it by tomorrow. We will see. But I know that for Fund 2, we're close to 90% bonus depreciation for investors. So that will be the same thing for this fund as well. I also want to highlight that my projections for our 29% hash power in April, today's price and difficulty for change, essentially we're looking at roughly 1.5% up and down a little bit for your first distribution, which will continue for 3 to 4 months, depending on when we get that Texas site online. And then it will be added to based on that bigger 71%. And of course, why it doesn't look like it's added extra 71%, because I'm projecting difficulty will increase over time. And this model is projecting a Bitcoin price going up as well. Two things is hard to predict, but as best as I can, this is what we're looking at. And I want to highlight our Niagara Falls site, which is hydropower. And for some of you guys who might have read any articles about New York having regulations around proof of work mining, that is coming out of the latest data assembly. That is for new data centers. This is grandfathered in. So we're lucky to have them inside here. It's a little bit loud. I'm just playing it because I want to just highlight that it's very, don't want to put miners at home, very loud. And that's what Bitcoin mining looks like. That's our Fund 3 miners, and we're our Fund 4 miners will be going. Sorry, you couldn't hear that, very loud. So that's where 1,400 of our miners are going. Right? And our West Texas site in Granbury, Texas, is right now they got all the permits and everything ready from a month ago, and they started to really get a really great progress. So initially they told me June, but we're selling on sort of July, so it's delivery date. And I think that's a very realistic schedule. I will be visiting there in a few weeks, and I'm going to try to also get a tour of this facility for potentially investors who might want to come. And then when we're up and running, I'd be happy to see if we can arrange some tours for investors to check out the site. A very cool thing, only less than an hour away off of Dallas. So hopefully a little bit central, allow people to attend and visit. So just wanted to reiterate the project timeline. We secured the miners, pricing secured. So if Bitcoin goes down anymore, that could happen. But I believe that we secured the miners at 37K Bitcoin price for the Texas site. And then we were able to then also install our miners starting in a few days in our New York site. And then we'll be mining and then setting distributions in as early as May. Although over the next few weeks, we'll also do a test distribution to investors. And then we'll installed our second batch of miners in July it'll take a while to install, probably 1-2 months to install those miners. But with that, that's the presentation. Short and quick.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eng. Let's go on to the questions. There are enough questions, and folks, please add your questions using the Q&A feature. Most of you have already done. Thank you so much. We have 12 questions already. So more questions, definitely please put them in the Q&A sections. And the first question is, can you send this presentation, this latest presentation that's being presented to all investors?
Yes.
Okay. So either through the portal or through an email, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you will definitely have this presentation. There's just one, most of the questions are about the current investors who've already deployed their capital with you. But there's an investor asking, what's the absolute drop dead date for sending funds out? So I guess this might be an investor who hasn't funded.
Yeah, so we are closing the fund at the end of the month. This is in partnership with some of our partners. So we want to coincide with that. We'll likely want to get funding by then as well.
Awesome. So I'm just trying to batch the questions together. There's one group of question which says, you said there would be a 6% return on investment paid out till the funds were actually deployed. Mm-hmm. Will they be part of the first distribution? How does that work? To all the people who asked about the 6%, I think this is the question. So Eng, if you can just walk them through how that 6% will be distributed.
Yes. So we'll be distributing the 6% annualized return at the end of the year in the last distribution of 2022.
So for example, if I had funded the investment in January, I'm not getting into nitty-gritties of the dates in early January, and let's say the distributions, while the distributions are being given in May, that's what you said, the first distributions, but they will be for the month of April, right? Maybe March, a bit of March and April, am I correct?
Yeah, so if somebody invested in provided capital in January, we'll be crediting them for February's non-deployment of capital, essentially. So as of March to today, this month we deploy capital, and we're mining at the end of the month.
Yeah, but it would be 6% annualized. So if it is for March, yeah, okay. So if anybody has doubts about that 6%, but that would be given as part of the last distribution of 2022 is what you said, right?
Yes.
Okay, if anybody else has question on the 6%, please do ask in case the question was not clarified and the answer was not clear enough. There is an investor who asks, if I want to take the distributions in cash until I get my capital returned to me, how would that change the projections?
All the projections I've stated are cash distribution projections based on, because I don't know if Bitcoin will go down when we send it to you or will go up when we send it to you. Even though I do know that, or at least my projections, are optimistic on terms of going up, and any incredible multiple is based on that. But on the projections I showed you today, those are on if we send it every month and you sold it or you took it in cash.
Got it. How are you seeing movement in the market like this? And they've given a link, which is a Cointelegraph link, which talks about ExxonMobil using their excess natural gas to power crypto mining operations, Exxon moving into mining. How are you seeing these movements in the market?
Yes, I do see more energy companies getting into Bitcoin mining, and I think there's a consortium of energy companies, really executives, some energy companies that are getting into it. I was talking to Troy, who we're working with on this mineral rights thing yesterday about putting some stranded gas there. The scale is going to be a bit harder. Gas is going to be obviously expensive as well. So I foresee that more people will want to get into Bitcoin mining because they see the profitability of it. But I think our head start and with someone like Compute North, it's going to give us a really great advantage.
The projections that you showed, do they include that 6% return?
No.
No. Okay. So all the projections are based on the actual Bitcoin return in cash, the cash equivalent of the Bitcoin return. The 6% is over and above that. And which model miners are you purchasing now? I think you mentioned them.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I see the question. Go ahead. Sorry, you can.
So which model miners are you purchasing now, and why not wait for newer models with supercooling?
I have been dabbling at looking at the newest Intel models. They're not very efficient, guys. So first of all, pricing is not great either. Bitmain has the newest XPs. Those are really efficient. They have the hydro-cooled miners. That was something that Bitmain has offered me as early as 3 months ago. The pricing on them is not great. It's all about value, right? Ultimately, what you want is computational power. And if you can get it as soon as possible and as productive as possible, that's more important than having it last for 5-10 years, because the first 2-3 years of this investment is where we're going to make the bulk of our Bitcoin. And if you're holding Bitcoin, that's really the most important thing. And so I want to get as much production and computation power as possible. And there's always this really fine line between buying something very new, which potentially might not have the history to produce Bitcoin for last for a long time, versus something that is tried and true and potentially is now not really seen as sort of the newest hot thing. If we can get our power costs down, which is what we've done with our Compute North site, then these less efficient miners, WhatsApp miners, the price of them just makes the productivity so much better. So it was always sort of a economic condition. And so getting something essentially 40-50% more production defeated sort of any notion that I want to get efficiency, because ultimately we're about getting more Bitcoin.
Thanks. I'm also making a list of things that investors have asked for in terms of update or in terms of uploading. I'll share that with you later. If you go to slide 7, the investor wants to know, what is the IRR without depreciation benefit if Bitcoin falls by half? I think it was 25K. You show the IRR with depreciation benefit, but they want to know what is the IRR without depreciation benefit.
It's close to 4%. So this is with Bitcoin at 50K. So a little bit, let me try to calculate that. It's 1% with Climb by half. And this is selling Bitcoin every month. When you sell it, right, with it being flatline, so you're selling it every month, you're getting around 40% the first year, 40% the second year, based on Bitcoin falling down by half every month. And because when Bitcoin falls down, what we usually see is that difficulty goes down. So that's why the model is if Bitcoin goes up, the other thing is that more people want to get into Bitcoin mining. So you're seeing a model or really a paradigm that has played out in the past 4 months, where when Bitcoin goes down, people stop capital flowing into Bitcoin mining, and old inefficient miners stop potentially might not be mining Bitcoin anymore. Which means that you see difficulty going down, which means that we're making more Bitcoin for the existing Bitcoin miners we have. And so that's based on the model.
And there are some investors who are asking some general questions or market condition questions, DeFi protocol questions. I'll take them at the end because the current investors who have invested in this fund, they have more immediate questions. Mm-hmm. So we'll take those questions first. When does the distribution begin for Fund 4? I think you said May would be the first distribution, right?
Yeah, so May would be the first distribution. I would expect more than 1% return on your investment based on the partial deployment.
Okay, two-part question, but we'll take one part at a time. Given how much things have changed since this fund was first presented, how confident are you on these two aspects? The first aspect is that the first deployment will actually be online and start mining in April. How confident are you?
I'm very confident because our Fund 3 miners are online now, and it's the same people, same company, same partners, same miners.
And how confident are you about the second batch being online in July?
That is a bit trickier question. I think I am twice, 3 times bitten in terms of deployment reliance. Compute North, while the most credible site, if you read some of their publications, Marathon has literally tens of thousands of miners that they're sourcing to Compute North. I talk to my partner at Compute North every week, and they've and based on every estimation and based on the lead times they've gotten, they have all the containers, they have all the transformers, they have the PPA, they have the permits, they have everything. They're just building the existing infrastructure, and so it's just all about just getting that ready. I just hate to commit to anything knowing that it has bitten me in the past, but I feel pretty confident enough that I made that purchase based on that timeline. And I could have made it on a June order, which would generally be shipped over then in end of June or early July. But I made it on July order to get a little extra discount as well.
Lots of varied questions. I'm just trying to club them, but also provide a little bit of variety. What is the energy source for the West Texas site?
It's mostly wind and nat gas. And they do have some really good hedges against the nat gas prices. So I was looking and talking to the director of energy there, Peter Lesko, who used to work at one of those energy companies. So we were talking about what their hedging strategies were.
What are the actual energy costs on the two sites?
So So when energy cost is divided, it's usually a lot less than what our actual cost is because they charge a premium on operations premium. Our all-in costs in New York is 6.325 cents. Our all-in cost in Texas is 5.8 cents, which is very good because the market right now for that timing and allocation is around 6.8 cents at that scale. But I believe that the energy cost is usually 1 to 2 cents cheaper than what they're telling me, although they generally will abstract as much as possible.
To the investor who asked the question on what's the energy cost in the Compute North site equals to West Texas equal to the second deployment. They are all the same thing. Do you want to take a 15-second break? Hang? Whatever. No. Are you okay? An investor asks, why weren't the issues, especially power constraints, why weren't the issues identified with the Sandusky, Ohio site? Why weren't they found during the original due diligence versus just finding out after the PPMs were signed?
Yes, so we could not do the load study until we were on the lease. And until we were on the lease, we couldn't do it, which we gave on the lease, we had an extended period to do it. It's definitely very unfortunate. I really would like that site visit many, many times. It would have been a very awe-inspiring site, although a little bit of inefficient use of space because of how much space there is. But ultimately, it just ended up not working out. And I've always had a plan B and C. Ultimately, what I care about is, can we get energy and predictable hosting and operations, and can we get really affordable miners? And those two things worked out in optimal in this case by waiting 3 months. If we had secured miners 3 months ago, we would have paid that premium back then, and we would have probably been in a significantly worse off position today. So I believe that our delay has been most optimal for this fund, and I've never been more bullish relative to what the market is now.
Thanks. And to the investors who asked the questions which have already been answered, if for any reason I was not able to ask your question in the right spirit or right way and you didn't get the answer, please feel free to ask the question again or in a different form, and I'll make sure that I put it across to Eng. It's just because I don't know many of the gory details of the things that you're asking and discussing as opposed to a traditional commercial real estate. I might be misquoting or misprojecting your question. An investor asks, what is the new projected price per Bitcoin mined? You mean the cost of mining? Is that what they're asking?
Yes. So it's around, it's mostly going to be factored in based on difficulty, by the way. It's not on power. Regardless of how much power is, just because it's more difficult than it was before, it's around 14,000, 13,000.
An investor asks, if the distributions start in May, when will they end? And what happens when it ends? I think this was covered during the initial, but please.
Yeah, no, this is a good question. And to be honest, we haven't been to an end of a fund, right? So we're gonna run these machines to the ground. We're in the first year, we're under warranty, and we're gonna repair them with warranty. Subsequent years, we'll repair them if they fail. And for the first fund, we've had to repair less than 0.3% of them because they're under warranty. And we're going to continue to run them until they continue. And that fund's been running for nearly a year now. So we're going to keep running them. And we're going to keep mining Bitcoin until the miners that are allocated to the fund, means the miners that are purchased entitled to the fund, are no longer profitable or no longer can be run profitably.
Thanks. There are 16 more questions. So in case I haven't asked you questions, it's purely because I'm going from top down. Will you update the Google Sheet that you have on the fund page?
Yes.
Okay. So I've taken that as a list that I'll send it across to you. And the first is to send this presentation to the investor. The second thing is to update the Google Sheet. Going back to the 6%, there are two questions. The 6% annualized return till funds are deployed, will it end with the partial deployment in New York, or will it continue till 100% deployment in Texas?
It'll end with when we deploy capital, which is this month.
Okay. It will end with the, you're saying it ends in March?
Yes.
If people have any follow-up questions, please do let us know. There's a question, how does the 6% interest annual payment work considering the new execution plan? I think we have sort of answered that.
Yeah.
Okay. Johnny, please, if that was not the intention behind the question, please do ask the question again. Be more than happy to clarify. What is the difference between Fund 4 and Fund 5?
Fund 4 is going on now. It's going live now. Fund 5, which is a partner is raising a much smaller batch for, will be on the tail end of our Texas deployment, although we might have something sooner depending on the capital. But this is sort of the most optimal way, secured, locked in, nothing really changes after this.
Okay, I hope that answered the question. I don't know if you were looking for a specific difference between 4 and 5. Please do ask us, we'll let you know. What is the total fund size? I believe they're talking about Fund 4 here. What is the total fund size and how much money did you raise?
It's around 35 million.
35 million. Mm-hmm. Love the numbers on the presentation. Is there data or an analysis document backing those numbers that we can see or that you can share?
Yes, I'll share the Excel model and you can dig into it, ask questions.
Was it the same Google Sheet that the other investor was referring to?
Yes.
Probably. Okay. So there's going to be some kind of pro forma sheet or a sheet that goes through this analysis that you can find in the portal when you log in. Hello, and for those of us who invested in the data center fund, it's okay to discuss the data center fund here.
Yes.
For those of us who also invested in the data center income fund, will that no longer be available due to the closure of the Ohio mining location?
No, that is still, so to clarify for anyone who invests in data center fund, the original purpose was to purchase an internal electrification and data center rack space and transformers and other equipment that will be related to Bitcoin mining or really tier 0 mining. We are part of the agreement which we will have with our partners in New York and Texas, getting a discount on our rates, and we're passing it to that fund because we're providing those equipment. That allows us to essentially have the fund as is in terms of paying the returns to investors starting next month.
Got it. Give me 1 second. There's a part B to the question. Based on the new operational costs, will the investor model spreadsheet be updated so that we can look through the different scenarios? How long can we expect to receive, to get our initial capital returned? Original projection was 12 months.
Yes, original projection was 12 months based on Bitcoin being 65K and difficulty what it is. Now I'm very much more realistic or conservative for my difficulty. So current model is around 18 months, but 18 months, which was actually what I presented the last State of the Union update 2 months ago as well, and has been during my outlook for the last 3 months. I do update the model every week or two, and I upload it onto the site as well as new projections, because unfortunately the challenge with any of these models is that things change all the time in crypto space, so it's hard to land. All I know is that this is probably the most efficient and productive use of our capital in terms of getting Bitcoin miner going.
Next thing. Based on the annual returns that we saw in the projection slide, it looks like the equity multiple for your realistic scenario is 2.72x. Is that correct?
Yes, around there. And that's when getting cash distribution, not accounting for any appreciation that happened in Bitcoin, which is what the multiple would be if you held on to it, assuming that that appreciated to the level that model forecast.
Like I said, even if you had asked a question earlier, if there are more investors, if there are more questions about what do you think of the market, what should I be doing with DeFi, those kind of general analysis questions, I'll keep them to the end, because investors who have invested in the fund, their questions I think should take precedence in terms of time. There's a question again, I don't think it hurts to clarify. The investor asks, the other data center income fund is affected or not affected? The fund with the 1% monthly return. Is that on schedule?
It is on schedule. We sent an update to the investors as well. It will also be closing the end of the month.
Okay, since you said that, and maybe because I have not invested in Bitcoin Fund 3, but I remember you telling me otherwise, there's an investor who says, I have also invested in Fund 3, but I have not heard much about that fund. Can you give a quick status?
I've been sending updates. Let me know if you guys aren't getting emails, because we've had a lot of investors tell us they haven't been getting emails. We're getting emails. I literally sent the first test submissions 2 days ago, or two days ago, I believe, or yesterday, I forgot. Using a lot of Bitcoin recently, and that's been online as of this month, and we're setting distributions, full distributions, fine 14.5 Bitcoins in the month of March for Fund 3. And
I do believe also over the turn of the year or in the beginning, because one of my friends has invested in Fund 3, there was a specific update, at least one update, which was sent on Fund 3, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, we had a State of the Union update in early January to cover Fund 3 and 4.
And you're also saying, if you're saying that you've been making test distributions for Fund 3, that means definitely communication to ask for Bitcoin address and to verify that all that should have been happening now, right?
We sent 184 wallets, Bitcoin.
Yeah. So to the investor who asked about Fund 3, please do reach out to Ryan or Eng. Maybe it is the setting in Syndication Pro or something that the emails are going to spam. Definitely do reach out to Eng. Ryan, if you're listening and you're able to see the chat Q&A thread, definitely reach out to this investor. I'll share the name with you, Ryan, so that you can reach out to this investor.
We sent it yesterday, the test distribution yesterday.
Yes. And you can also reach to Ryan at Tozi Capital. But Ryan, I'll share the name of this investor. Please do get back to them because it looks like they haven't heard from you. Are you allowing investors to divest earlier? If I'm interpreting one of your emails correctly, can you explain your rationale behind that?
Yes, it's a good question and something that I was thinking about a lot. One of the things is I want investors who come into this fund knowing that, first of all, our plans have changed, but we're making the most optimal decision. And because we were delayed, we actually have a more optimal outcome. But for those who might not be, understanding that, might not be, might have came into it not knowing how volatile this market is and can be, I do want to provide that potential option. So I would love for investors to, schedule some time with me. I would love to get your feedback, understand, if that's something that you would like to do. But it's a really interesting opportunity here where we essentially are mining the dip. We're buying Bitcoin miners at 37K. Essentially, when I bought them, I secured the contract last 2 weeks ago, and we're essentially getting more Bitcoin than originally projected. Now, if your outlook for Bitcoin is same versus 3 months ago, or if it's different, then that's something that is hard to predict. But when I provided that opportunity, I really wanted to allow investors to have that conversation with me. And I think net neutral, we're kind of like people, I believe probably a little bit of people going out, a little people coming in. So probably neutral impact.
You mentioned that the cost of the Bitcoin miners could be, if you buy them in futures, is $5,000. Was that an average cost?
Yes.
Okay.
Of the futures contract.
Okay. I think this investor might not have been part of your previous Bitcoin fund, so they're asking, can you explain how the returns are projected to work? For example, if an investment of 50K was made, and let's take that the first month distribution was 1%, then would I be getting $500 or whatever portion of a Bitcoin that 500 can buy? Yeah,
it would be $500. It'll be 1% of your investment. So I always relate things to your investment, total investment. So you're investing in 50K or 100K, you get X% of that in that given month.
Yeah, but just So for example, let's just turn it around on its head. And Nisha is the investor. So Nisha, please make sure that you're comfortable with the answer. So I think the way because I was in the know-how on fund 2 and 3, the distribution, at least the operational. So the way it works is at the end of the month, we have mined so many coins, Bitcoins, actual coins. And then there are the expenses associated with the coins. The expenses go away. Then what needs to go to the investors? Let's think of it as net operating income, right? So what I would call net operating Bitcoin, if I can loosely use that word, that needs to go to investors. So that gets divided among the investors based on their positions, right? Based on their percentage funded. That is, for example, maybe that will come to N Bitcoins or point N Bitcoins. You as an investor either choose to say, just give me the point N Bitcoins to my wallet, or you are telling Eng through your choice that convert it into US dollars and give it to me. That's what is actually happening. Now, the way the return numbers are projected is, let's say it is point something Bitcoin and its equivalent value is $500, like you mentioned. So obviously, then you take the dollar equivalent of that Bitcoin and use that to project what is the return, which is 1%. So if you're going to get an equivalent of $500 worth of Bitcoin in the first month, then we calculate that it's equal to $500 by your 50,000, it's 1%. That's the way the 1% is. Am I correct?
Yep.
And please do ask the question again for us to go through maybe an Excel sheet example if it's not clear. Those are all projection questions. In case Bitcoin does go down drastically, what would be your exit strategy?
If Bitcoin goes down drastically, I think the plan isn't necessary to exit because are we saying it's going down and staying down? Or is it going down and going up and going down? Because if I react every time it goes down or up, that's not necessarily what this investment is about. This investment is about dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin, regardless if it's at 30K, 44K, which is what it is now, 100K. I'm not buying or selling more Bitcoin. I'm just mining Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin falls down for a long winter, there are some contingency strategies around pausing mining, and that's baked into our contract. If we become unprofitable, we can pause mining for that current month until it becomes more profitable in the future. The bet is that Bitcoin will at least maintain its value and potentially will go up more. But this Bitcoin mining is about a dollar cost averaging of Bitcoin in every month, regardless of what price it is.
So an operational question, will there be any dashboard to see how these miners are working on a monthly basis?
Yes, yes, there will be. And I apologize for anyone in our earlier funds who have not had that yet because we've had some operational challenges with our developer. And I'm working on, once we get Bitcoin Fund 4 live, my plan is to create a unified tool. I was actually talking to Shiv earlier today about it. We're going to create something that investors can log into, see the production of Bitcoin, see how the miners working, and make it as easy as possible. I don't want to commit to any timelines on that, but I do know that that's going to resolve a lot of potential issues for you, to provide more transparency and resolve any issues around if you want to change your wallets or a Bitcoin address, although we'll work on the details of that.
Yeah, let's split that into two, right? Forget about the investors. You have an access to a portal where you can look at the miners every second, right?
Yes.
And what you had asked me was, is there a way we can transparently, using some kind of auth-in mechanism, have a portal where our investors can log in and look at the miners for pertaining to their fund? So that in a read-only mechanism, so they cannot fiddle around with that. That was one of your requirements, right? So investors, it's there. His idea is there. He has access to the miners. How do we give it to a group of investors without asking them to create a separate login, but still make sure it's protected. Those are the things that Eng has asked me as well. So I'm going to look into that. Meanwhile, if any of you have any good ideas of a good Auth0 Auth0 implementation that can tunnel through to a different view, that it's something that we can discuss. But I'll also take it down as one of the asks from the meeting. How long do you estimate the current equipment will last and continue being able to be used?
Most estimations expect 5 years. So, and really, it's more about not really about how long they will last. I do believe there will be some wear and tear and some decay of them just from them overheating and maybe not having the proper hash words to replace them. But it's more about how long would they be profitable. And of course, if Bitcoin goes up and difficulty goes up and more efficient miners come online, they'll be less profitable if Bitcoin does not follow the same pattern. But in 2020, old machines that were 4+ years old, S9s they call them, were plugged in, and now they still run. So I think it's more indicative of profitability than long-term performance.
2 questions on the break-even price for Fund 4. I think you mentioned it twice yesterday, twice already. It's 14K is what you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 14K is the break-even price.
Yeah. And I do want to expand on that break-even price, because you can always add more capex to get better, lower break-even. And that's potentially a narrative that a lot of public companies like to do. They get the most efficient miners, pay for capex, essentially cheaper, better equipment, more advanced equipment that costs potentially millions, that adds to the total capex to get that low cost of mining. But really, you're talking about all-in costs, right? So all-in cost is really where you want the most productive hash power per mine. And so this, in my estimation, is our best economic valuability, taking this step.
Awesome. We have 7 more questions. We are close to the top of the hour. Sorry about that to all the investors. Some of them actually are specific questions about the returns, so you might want to stay back for that. If I take a cash loan against your Bitcoin holdings when the price is, say, 60K, what would happen should the price of Bitcoin fall by 50%, say to 30K? What impact, if any, do the price swings have on the loan?
Yes. So it depends on if you're taking it in a live protocol, which just means, and I see somebody asked about DeFi protocol. If your LTV limit is, say, 70%, which is a common LTV limit, then on a 60K valuation of Bitcoin, you say you want 1 Bitcoin, you can take 70% of that LTV. And if the LTV changes depending on if the loan goes up and down or the value of the Bitcoin goes up and down. And the value goes down enough that the LTV now exceeds that initial LTV cap, then you generally get liquidated, or a partial Bitcoin gets sold at that current spot price to then sell and then pay down the loan so that the LTV goes back to equilibrium. And so if you hear about liquidations or liquidation cascades, that's what is happening in DeFi or in general. Like when price crashes a lot, that's what happens when there's a cascading effect where essentially a lot of people took loans. They thought that they were safe in a certain buffer zone if Bitcoin falls down 10, 20%. But sometimes if there's a crash, then it can, so be careful when you're leveraging your coins. You don't lose all of it, but you do lose enough that it's not great. So LTV is dynamic based on current price and how much you are taking out a loan.
More new questions are coming in. Sorry about that. So investors, if you have questions, just put them in quickly. That way we can project our time as well, because other investors have to leave as well. This might be interesting because they might not have listen to some portion, or they did. The return monthly, the monthly return then is not even return of capital plus 1% gain. It's just 1% gain. So when you say that there is a 1% in your chart, it's not return of capital plus 1%, it's just 1%.
I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, so my understanding of that question, and to the investor who asked the question, you can please ask again. If I just see a 1% return for month N that you have on your chart, it's actually just absolute 1% return. It's not return of capital plus 1% profit. That's not what it is, right?
Yes, it's not. I'm not sure where that.
Where it shows it is 1%. It's 1% of your investment gets returned in that month, if that's what it says.
Yeah.
But please do ask the question if we had misinterpreted. What's the equity multiple projection? What does it look like, the EM, if we hold Bitcoin all the way through, considering we have 60% more of hash power? Well, it depends.
So based on the numbers I have, it's around 7.4x, 7.5x. So that's with dollar cost averaging, not dollar cost averaging, that's dollar cost averaging the expenses.
Yeah, I mean, those things are better left to just people playing around with the sheets themselves, right? Because
yes,
it's written in sand or in water, actually, depending on so many things. Oh yes, now some questions about market conditions, what we could do and so on. We have the last 5 questions. Today I saw in the news that Russia is planning to sell some energy and natural gas and take Bitcoin. This seems to be great news for Bitcoin pricing. What are your thoughts?
I here, Shiv, I'd love to have a debate with you on this. Like, I think there's going to be 3 axes of, I'm not sure anyone follows biology. Great. I think I used to be a CTO of Coinbase. He articulated that there will be 3 monetary systems going forward. One is the dollar monetary system, the other would be the RMB monetary system, the Chinese, and then one would be with enough scale would be the Bitcoin, called the neutral monetary system. So I do believe this thesis potentially could materialize in the future, where there is a multipolar world, and monetary economic systems dominate the dollar as a currency reserve, one polar, and the RMB dominate the second polar. And then this neutral polar or neutral basis, a scale, which will likely be Bitcoin because of its neutrality. And it doesn't have to scale yet to do that, but I believe that could be in the cards for it. So I've never been more bullish on Bitcoin as sort of this independent currency system. It's not really a currency system, it's a monetary system, so that you can see exactly what's happening in the news. The use case for Bitcoin has never been stronger, I believe.
Thanks. Where is a good place to stake BTC for earning interests?
So there are some, I can make some recommendations. Amber Pro generally has good lending. Celsius has good lending protocols. Now, I'll be careful. Of course, there's always custodial risks. People can get hacked, although generally they're big enough that they cover any of those stuff. You're usually earning only 4 to 5%. The benefit, of course, is getting leverage into those as well. You can take a loan, usually 50 to 70% LTV. In the future, for my amassing of Bitcoin, I will likely not sell it. I would probably just take loans against it to take any liquidity I might need.
What DeFi protocol would you recommend for leveraging BTC?
Yeah, so I mentioned that in the same. Although Badger is really the thing. Although I think it's evolving. DeFi is not generally known very closely with Bitcoin, but it is evolving.
Where can I get more information related to Bitcoin Fund 5?
I guess who is promoting? I think Hunter Thompson is promoting that one.
So talk to Hunter Thompson?
Probably talk to me. I can talk about it.
Oh, but what you're saying is it's not directly open to our investors. This is for Hunter Thompson investors. That's what you're saying. Okay. So Fund 5, although operationally and all the math and heavy lifting is done by Tozi Capital and Eng. It is for investors coming through Hunter Thompson. So it's a separate batch of capital for their investors. Last question. Several news articles mention that rural residents complain about the noise associated with Bitcoin mining operations, and county officials are rethinking their original decision about allowing these type of operations. Have you heard anything like this, and what effect have you seen?
Yes, I have heard many things like this, and the impact is that some of the permits that were, that we thought were going to be easily approved have not been approved. That has affected a lot of my Plan Bs, Cs, and Ds. And so, the Granbury, Texas site is something that is in rural Texas, but not near anyone. And then with the New York site that's been grandfathered in, and it's a really isolated site. So that's been running for 2 years now. No complaints from them.
I don't know if there's a question or an observation.
It's just an observation.
That's just an observation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There is a question that's come up on chat. Will you still have a webinar on how to open a Bitcoin wallet?
Yes, I plan to do a video to open a Bitcoin wallet. I guess I could do a webinar. Does that make sense, to a webinar versus?
I would think a pre-recorded video is more optimal for that, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Yes, and by the way, if you're opening a Coinbase wallet, Coinbase does dynamically change your wallet, but the address you get at any time will still stay with you. It's such a long string of numerals and numbers that this almost infinitesimal amount of combinations that you would be surprised that you have millions of wallets addresses associated to your one account. So don't be shocked if your Coinbase Bitcoin address changes from day to day. What you get every second is still associated to your account. FYI on that. And I know we had some investors.
Yeah, so basically, as you're going through this process of Bitcoin address verification, a whole bunch of investors, because I was involved in the operational aspect of it, would say, hey, the last time I gave you the address, it was this, but now Coinbase is showing this. Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is investors can be at peace. Whatever address it showed at one point of time and they shared with us is still valid. If you send money to that wallet, they will get it. It's just that if something new shows up, that's an additional wallet address. The previous one is not invalidated.
Yeah.
Awesome. With that, we have come to the end of the questions, 7:07. Thank you so much to all the investors. Thank you so much, Eng, for answering the question. That's all I have. Thank you so much for having me moderate the session. Over to you, Eng, for any closing remarks.
Thanks, everybody, for sticking with us throughout this whole presentation and sticking with us throughout the whole investment cycle. We're closing at the end of the month in accordance with our partners planning. And I'm very excited to start providing Bitcoin over the next few weeks. The exciting and part begins in terms of setting up your wallets and setting up distributions. We will always have more to improve going forward. And I'd love to get your feedback on how we can make better improvements. If you are a developer and have very good skills on UI, feel free to contact us. I would love to work with anybody who would like to help us, materialize some of these things faster. But we are still committed to making sure you have the best investment experience as much as possible. Thanks again, Shiv, for moderating with me. And thanks everyone for attending tonight.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening and good night.
Have a great evening.